Hello, good day everybody, and welcome to GHI as webinar in partnership with ALI, our cargo sister cargo title. We are looking at the great air cargo opportunity post-COVID. Welcome back everybody who is a return visitor to our webinars. If you were here a couple of weeks ago for our winter ops session, welcome back. I hope you had a good couple of weeks and that business has continued to improve for you. If you're a new joiner today, then welcome from myself and everyone at GHI to the session. We hope you enjoy the next hour and a half or so. Everyone got their sleeves rolled up, ready for Sputnik 5? Get that vaccine. Great to see a vaccine arrive. How effective it is, we'll wait and see. But it's great to see that development, and hopefully many more are on the way. Right, I'm just going to begin with some housekeeping. If you've been before, you know the drill, but if you're new, then please listen up. You can ask questions throughout today's session, and we actively encourage it. There is a little bubble icon, a question icon at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that throughout the presentations, you can submit your question, and you can also like people's questions. If you do that, it just rises them up the order on my screen, and I will ask those ones first. Just to say as well that we will be asking you a few questions in this session. We'll have a few live polls today, and all you need to do at that point when I instruct you is to vote on your preferred option. There are going to be 6 outstanding presentations coming up of 10 minutes. I'll say that again, 10 minutes to our panel. We're very tight for time, and we will try and keep to that time frame to give you plenty of time for the questions a little bit later on. All of the presentations will be sent round to you. They'll come round from the GHI team, probably be tomorrow morning, so you will get to see those. I would like to thank our headline sponsor today. Thank you to everyone at JBT. This is the second webinar that the JBT team have supported, so thank you all very much for doing so. Okay, just a sort of starters for 10 from me. We've all seen pictures like this over the past 4 months or so during the pandemic. These guys don't complain about the leg room, they don't need feeding in flight, and they don't get up and rifle through those overhead lockers before the seatbelt signs have been turned off. The cabin has become the place for cargo. Lots of temporary conversions going on, lots of airlines looking to drive revenue, use their aircraft assets during this pandemic. Is this going to be the new normal? Be interested to get the panel's view today, or will it just be a passing fad? The capacity crunch IATA figures released in June, showing that although demand is down for air cargo by 27% during this coronavirus crisis, that supply is down even more, 42%. So there's a gap between supply and demand, and that would suggest there is an opportunity here for new market entrants, whether it's airlines on the distribution side, or whether it's handlers, cargo operations at airports. Now that's triggering a lot of interest. We've seen 68% of GHI survey respondents saying they were looking to expand their cargo offer during this pandemic. They are interested in driving new revenue streams. But finally, couldn't have a session talking about air without Michael Jordan. I'm sure you've all been watching The Last Dance during lockdown like me. It just brings to mind this analogy of whether you can be world-class at 2 different disciplines, so packs and cargo. Michael Jordan, best basketball player ever, every single individual title, 6 NBA rings. He was very good at baseball too, and he tried to get a career in baseball, but he just wasn't world-class. So can you be good at 2 very different disciplines that passenger and cargo present? To help me answer those questions and many more, I'd like to welcome our panelists today. First up, if I can bring everyone on screen, I'd like to welcome Murat Kirker, who is VP of Cargo Operations at Turkish Airlines Cargo. Welcome. We also have Robert Fordry, who is Executive Vice President Cargo at Menzies Aviation. Welcome, Robert. We have Paul Fallon, who is Director Commercial and Business Development at Virgin Atlantic Airways. So welcome, Paul. And we are joined by David Bunting, who is MD EMEA at JBT Aerotech. Welcome, David. And we have Gilbert Burke, who's Head of P2F Sales at EFW Conversion House. Welcome, Gilbert. And finally, last but not least, we have Celine Hawkard, who is Transition Director at TIACA Global Air Cargo Association. Welcome, Celine. Okay, I'm going to hand straight over to Murat, who's going to deliver our first presentation, and the stopwatch starts now. Murat, so over to you.
Okay, thank you, Max. Let me share the presentation. I'm starting with the challenges of COVID-19. First of all of us saw a decrease in the belly capacity because of the lack of passengers. And the borders are closed, and only transportation could be done by airlines. And the need for medical supplies increased suddenly, and personal protective equipment. What we did to overcome the situation, we started to use some of passenger aircrafts we call freighters in here, and we started to load cargo on seats, and we invested some more on equipment to make our customers happy, because there are less customers, as you show in the beginning of the presentation. Yes, there are less customers, and we need to make them happy. During the COVID-19 process, we need to adapt to the new normal in our operations. We started to be more dynamic on scheduling and sustaining of our network. Let me continue. And after taking all these into account, what have we done? We make quick freighter implementations. We started to use some of our aircrafts, 777s and some 330s as a freighter, and we started to be more focusing on utilization of the aircrafts, freighter aircrafts especially, and for cabin loading, that there were some obstacles ahead of us. What were they? There was no documentation, there was no experience, and we needed to complete all of them in a short time period. For standardization, some producers, Airbus, Boeing, some EASA and IATA, all of these organizations told something different, and I saw that the standardization has not settled even now yet, and I'm going to talk more about the details of the standardization, especially on safety issues. During this COVID-19 process, the staff became more problem for most of the ground handling agencies, and even for some airlines, and we needed to reschedule our staff to optimize our operations, and we needed to make transportation of especially some type of products. For example, personal protective equipments and pharmaceuticals. These brought us some differences according to our normal operation. For example, for us, per pallet, the weight has decreased 25% for us. That means more volumetric cargo has been transported during COVID-19 times. And for STK, we are serving to 90 destinations with 23 freighters at the moment, with 170 freighter frequencies. And we were hoping to gain more market share by growing by our side, but we grew, but it was the outcome of the decrease of our competitors. Our rate of market share increased from 3.8% global to 4.6% between 2019 and 2020. And even in this time period, we managed to grow our tonnage, thanks to all of our team. For cabin loading, what have we done? We firstly evaluated 3 different scenarios, and first of them was on-seat loading, as most carriers did. We quickly implemented it, and we put some covers over the seats, completed the documentation, and we started the first option. But the negative sides are there was limited piece and volume weights which can be carried on seats, and high fuel consumption, because all the seats were still there and we were carrying them on our aircrafts, and it was taking too long time to load and unload the aircrafts. Many people were doing the operation, and it was bringing more cost from ground handlers. The second option is on panel loading, just removing the seats and using the panel, putting the shipments and then using a net to cover them. It was fuel saving according to the first option. Medium piece volume shipments was being carried, and there was some more investment on that, and the average implementation time was more than the first one, so we didn't use the second option yet, but currently we are evaluating all the options again, because at first we were thinking that it will not take too long time, the COVID-19 process, maybe 2 or 3 months, but we saw that it is not finishing, and now we are evaluating the other options, and maybe in a short time period, maybe second or third option may be chosen. The third option is removing the seats and on ground, making strengthening on the floor, and then we can carry more heavy shipments, but it needs more investment and more time to convert the aircraft. So for now, we are only using the first option, and as I told, the second and third options are currently on our agenda. We are evaluating them. And fourth option, which is not here, is completely converting the aircraft, but currently, as operation, it's not our decision, it's a company decision. The sales team and the planning team may evaluate that, and maybe in a short, if this situation continues this way, then we may choose the fourth option as well. And what we expect from ground handling partners, for especially cabin loading, the safety is really important. I have seen many pictures which is showing the heavy shipments or mail shipments are being carried on the aircraft seats, and it's really dangerous. We have seen the unfortunate Ethiopian accident in Shanghai, and no one would like to experience the same type of accidents, the fires problems. So safety is really important in here, and there are some bad examples of that we are seeing every day. And digital documentation and e-airable became more important. Instead of using people, we can do something more with our systems instead of people. And the same automated track and trace systems and automated warehouse systems are helping ground handlers to prevent the loss of lack of people. They can use the automation instead of people, and if they do more automated warehouse, they will be less affected from staff problems. And in this time period, it was difficult to attain the customers. So we need to make them more happy. And that's why we wanted better delivery times to customers. But again, unfortunately, some of our partners couldn't provide such a service to us because of the problems. And also, maybe it's not their intention to do that, because in Istanbul, even hundreds of people became COVID, and then they returned the business. So the other partners of us may be affected the same way, but we don't want to see such bad effects of lack of labor. And on-time performance is again related, and special cargo prioritization. If our customers are trusting us, believing us that we can transport their goods in such a different time period, we need to do it in best way, but not again all ground handlers could help us on this issue as well. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
How long
an interesting one. You were into injury time, but I'll let you go on that one. 11 minutes. But it was very interesting stuff. And Prater, that's a new one on me, an interesting mashup. I hadn't heard that one before.
Okay.
So if you have questions for Murat, I think one of the participants already put them in the right place. I think the second one come in, that little Q&A bubble at the bottom of your screen. Just put your questions in there as we're going along and with the other presentations, and we'll come to them in a little while. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Robert Fordry at Menzies Aviation.
Thanks, Max. So for anybody that was looking at me whilst Murat was talking, I was on my mobile phone there. So literally COVID-19 in action. I was receiving a WhatsApp message from a customer who is looking to put a PAX freighter into an airport where we have ground handling in place. So I'm literally organising a PAX freighter as we speak on this webinar as well. So apologies for that. On my presentation, just to give you a little bit of context for Menzies Aviation. So I'm sure most of you are aware that are listening in that Menzies is a global organization. We do cargo handling, but we also do ground handling, we do fueling, we do lounge management, we do lots of other elements of aviation business. And certainly with our cargo business, we are handling over 1.5 million tons a year. We're at 37 different locations around the world. So we're involved with a lot of different customers and a lot of different cargo requirements. Just a bit of a flavor of some of the customers that we are engaging with, and this is across the world. And then to get into COVID-19, so I think like most organizations, we had to react very quickly to a developing situation. In days, we had realized that schedules were going to be dramatically reduced. We didn't know for how long, and it became clearer and clearer that it was going to be not days, not weeks, but it was going to be longer than that. So what we had to do to sustain our business was to effectively send significant proportion of our employees home. We have had support from many governments around the world that has helped us to help retain most of our employees to date, which is very important. And then as COVID-19 developed, we started to see the introduction of PAX freighters, as Murat has already explained. We started to see carriers continuing with a passenger flight, but no passengers, which means that the payload for cargo was significantly increased because there's no passenger baggage on that aircraft. So what we were starting to see was a mixed bag of volumes. Some carriers not operating at all, so what we had planned for didn't materialize at all. others with actually significantly increased volumes, particularly with the PPE that was being distributed around the world. So we went from send everybody home, effectively closed down, to a few short days later, okay, we need to have a certain amount of employees back. We need to open up in many locations. And what we did and what we put into place was like a return to work plan for those employees. Some of them were away for a number of days, some of them were away for a number of weeks, some perhaps longer than that. So we had to effectively start up again. So the 5-point plan that we put into place, there was a lot of communication. We had an intranet page for our employees, reminding them of safety. We had lots of video messages from our senior management team, welcoming people back into work. The operational processes, it's a new normal, so it's not like it was before. Lots of safety guidance within our operational processes. We had to explain to people about social distancing and the necessity to adhere to that. And we've actually got some high-vis clothing that has got social distancing instructions on the high-vis clothing as well. We then put into place, obviously, PPE to keep everybody safe. And in the work areas, they're cleaned and disinfected so that we can keep people safe. The most important thing, people that are remaining in work and people that are returning to work, is that we keep them safe. So that's the start of our return to the new normal, because there won't be a return to the old normal, not for the foreseeable future. So if we then look at our business, the cargo handling facilities, and just to give an example, when we have a really finely tuned and well-running cargo business, and I'll just pick one facility, one warehouse in one particular location. Normally we handle for multiple airline customers. In an ideal world, those airline customers' flight schedules would complement each other. The tonnages would come together to maximize the capacity use in the building. And if we look at those carriers as pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, if we can get all those carriers and those jigsaw pieces to fit perfectly together, we have the optimum cargo business. That's what works really, really well for a cargo handler that is handling multiple carriers. We have teams that can focus on the customers throughout the day. We don't have huge peaks of operation. We don't have massive downtime where the employees are not productive. And that takes quite a bit of time to bring all of that together and to make it tick and make it work really, really well. So the jigsaw puzzle, when it comes together, that's our optimum business. To continue with that analogy, now with the result of COVID-19, the carriers' schedules are very different to what they were before. Some have significantly increased, some are not operating at all. That means that if we continue with the analogy of the carriers being the jigsaw pieces, they're all now a different size and shape. So our puzzle actually doesn't work any longer. Our carefully constructed optimum business, it doesn't work. And what we need to do is to reconsider all of those customers and how they come back together again. So it's not simply a case of customers that were flying previously, when they start flying again, it will all go back to what it was before. What we're having to do is to evaluate the best mix within the facility. The pricing that we had previously, does that still work for us? The operational delivery we could do previously, does that still work? So we're effectively building the business back up again, almost from scratch, to try and find the most optimum solution, both for customers and for ourselves. So for me, it's been an enormously challenging period of time. It's not just reacting, as I said right at the start, to inquiries from customers about charters that will happen tomorrow. It's about trying to forecast and plan what our business is actually going to look like next month, next year, and the year after that. And it is very, very challenging because, as Murat was indicating, it changes every day. So we're still in that phase of really trying to understand exactly what the business is going to look like in the future, at the same time as trying to keep a business operating today and be ready for the future, whatever the future may be. And that's the big unknown right now.
Thank you, Robert. Brilliant stuff, right on time. Just to say, my fault, I've told you to put the questions where the speech bubble is at the bottom. Do it with the one with two speech bubbles, so the Q&A. There's two little speech bubbles. Drop your questions in there as we go along, and we'll come to them in a little while. Interesting stuff, and we'll pick up on some of the points Robert made there later on. I'm now going to hand over, though, to Paul Fallon at Virgin Atlantic Cargo, and over to you, Paul.
Great, thank you very much, Max, and hello to everybody. I shall try and get the pointer to work. So for Virgin Atlantic, I think to help to try to illustrate the COVID-19 story, it's probably important if we start off right at the beginning. So if we were to cast our mind back just kind of 8 months to January, we were actually in really kind of buoyant mood and buoyant spirits. We had recently completed an acquisition for a short-haul business in the UK, an airline called Flybe. We were making the final preparations to relaunch that business, to rebrand it, and all of this was really in support of the proposed expansion at Heathrow, the third runway. We have and had lots of plans around becoming, as we were calling it, Britain's second flag carrier. At the same time, we were starting to receive a new fleet type. So we had just taken our very first A350-1000, which is the first of 12 and is luckily an incredible aeroplane. So things were really on the up. We were planning growth throughout 2020, and we started the year at around about a fleet of 45 airplanes, and we were aiming at about $2.5 to $3 billion. So that was January. Now, as we got into February, obviously all of the early indications around COVID-19 were starting to come through. And we could really feel in our business that things were changing pretty dramatically. So as we passed through February, we could really see in passenger intakes and in passenger numbers that things were starting to change, and we were going to have to take pretty dramatic action. I guess probably for most people on this call, we've all felt as being in aviation really at the forefront of this whole crisis. And I think for Virgin Atlantic, at times, we felt really at the very forefront of of the crisis. But as we went through February, some incredible things started to happen. We had a very brief moment in time where Mr. Trump had started to close the US borders initially to Europe, but the UK was left in a strange situation where we were still able to operate and carry passengers into the US. And there was about a 36-hour bubble where the US was effectively locked out for mainland Europe, and the UK, in theory, became the only cargo link or bridge connecting the North Atlantic. And what we saw in those few hours was just this incredible spike in demand, and it started to point towards that something is going to shift in terms of supply and demand in this industry, and probably all of the normal economics that we're used to were about to be turned on the head. So I mean, right at the top of this, Max talked about that supply and demand balance and how it's so dramatically shifted. So we thought to ourselves, we need to respond to this, and we need to think about what opportunities might potentially lay ahead. So at that time, in around about February, as I mentioned, we had a fleet of 45 exclusively wide-body, exclusively long-haul aeroplanes. Virgin Atlantic was about a $2.5 billion business. Cargo equated to about 10% of the overall, kind of pretty standard airline economics. But obviously things started to change, and sorry, I've just shifted on. And we had to start really reimagining what a cargo business was going to look like. So we really started to work through what the fundamentals were of our economics. We started to think about operating passenger aeroplanes in the scenario of low or zero passenger revenue. And we started to think about how we might need to work with our colleagues to implement an operation that could potentially operate solely on a cargo basis. One of the most kind of famous features, I think, for many of us during this process has been loading in the cabin of an aeroplane. So we've seen all of the photos of sorry, my laptop's going crazy. So we've seen all the photos of PPE loaded into the cabin. Incredibly, we made it onto the front page of the business section of the New York Times. It's not often the world of cargo gets a mention, but we were starting to really catch people's attention. But this really was only a very small piece of the overall pie. We had to really figure out how could we implement a schedule that would work for our customers, how could we implement the procedures and processes that would allow us to fly profitably, and I say profitably in inverted commas, profits, not something that any airline I don't think is aiming at the moment. We had to figure out how we could operate on a positive and on a cash positive basis. So we worked hard with colleagues internally, people I'd never met before. If we think about our internal network planners, today I speak to them 7 days a week. We are constantly planning, replanning. Until February, we'd never talked, we'd never met these people. Still today, many of them I've never actually met in person. But right now we're working together every day to work through the changes that kind of Rob mentioned. We're having to week by week figure out what is the optimal network in response to this ever kind of changing cargo demand. So as we've worked through it, I think it's fair to say we have been pretty successful. Our cargo business right now through the second quarter in revenue terms is about twice the size it was in 2019, and that's despite only flying around 20% of capacity. As we complete the quarter, I think it's fair to say we'll probably continue in a similar vein. I think the big learning for us so far has really been just how fast things move and how fast things change. And for everybody, we're having to reinvent our business. We've been pretty blessed in that the key partners that we work with, so for us, we outsource all of our ground handling at Heathrow in the UK. On the cargo side, we work very closely with Donati UK, who themselves have had to go through tremendous change and tremendous adaptation. But where we've been fortunate is incredible strength in our partnership. We are working together every day pragmatically, trying to figure out what challenges lay ahead, what changes we need to make day by day, week by week. And the culmination of that really is the ability to continue and maintain a pretty successful but very, very different cargo business.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Very interesting. I doubt you've had a holiday for the past 5-6 months looking at that. Very busy times. Brilliant. Thank you. We'll come back to some questions a little later on. I'm now going to hand over to David Bunting of JBT Aerotech for our next presentation. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Max. Hey, Max, you said originally you said 5 minutes. Have you stretched it out to 10 to allow us to overrun?
I'm being lenient. I'm being a little lenient. We can go between 5 and 10. We're on time. We're on time. So,
excellent.
But if you get to 10, my red card will be out. So
I plan to keep it. Okay. So good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. As you heard, I'm David Bunting, and I'm the Managing Director for JBT GSE, with responsibility for sales and customer service in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to be part of the panel today. And I'll be talking about GSE used in cargo operations and some of the challenges faced in the current crisis. For those of you who don't know us, JBT are a global manufacturer of ground support equipment and passenger boarding bridges. Our range of mobile equipment spans a wide array of customer requirements, including pallet and ULD transporters, pushback tractors, cargo loaders. Much of the range is available in both electric and diesel and is widely used in cargo operations. In fact, some of our largest and most long-standing customers are global freight companies who really depend on the reliability of our equipment and the after-sales support. So common equipment used in cargo operations include belt loaders for handling light and loose packages, through to cargo loaders, which can handle loads ranging from 7 to in excess of 30 tons. And it's not uncommon in these applications for equipment to operate at full capacity. Pallet transporters and ULD trucks are commonly used to move freight from the aircraft area, as are tractors and dolly trains. And as Murat and Robert said earlier, with the advent of the COVID-19 crisis and travel restrictions, vast numbers of passenger flights were grounded, which caused a cargo crunch due to the loss of capacity from the passenger aircraft belly. And this came at a time when there was a huge demand for the rapid delivery of medical equipment and PPE across the globe. But the industry quickly adapted and even made the television news in some countries. And as you can see, even Richard Branson was tweeting about it. So as previously said, coverage that cargo just never had before, I guess. And as we've heard, one way airlines adapted was to utilize passenger cabins to transport freight. And I think the term Praetor was coined originally, I saw, by Lufthansa to describe passenger cargo flights. Now, this method does present challenges, as we've heard a little about earlier, particularly if the seats aren't removed. Additional considerations such as clear access to safety equipment, such as fire extinguishers, respiratory aids, and safely securing the loads to prevent movement and damage in flight. And can also be very labour intensive, as was said earlier, often requiring a large number of staff to load and unload the goods. And loading and unloading with conventional GSE isn't always possible, as the equipment wasn't designed to dock onto an aircraft cabin door. And although there are some adaptations possible, for example, with cargo loaders utilising deck plates and additional safety barriers on the loader's operator platform, they're not always ideal. And if you take a look at edition 3 of IATA's guidance for the transport of cargo and mail on aircraft configured for the carriage of passengers, it recommends using elevating equipment such as PRM and catering trucks and passenger stairs. And as I've said, this can be very labour intensive and slow, requiring additional manual handling from the elevating truck into a cargo truck or having to drive to the cargo area. And in the case of passenger steps, a human chain passing boxes to one another is often utilised. And as you can see in the example pictured, we've got about 10 people needed to carry out that task just on the steps alone. A similar option has been used on passenger boarding bridges, also using chains on the stairs. So we looked at a number of potential solutions to this application, and working with Donata UK at London Heathrow, together we came up with the cargo chute pictured here. And what it is a simple and straightforward concept to assist in the unloading of non-fragile goods from passenger cabins. The chute can be fixed to virtually any existing passenger stair and can be removed when no longer required, returning the passenger stairs to their original use. And this is important in the medium term, as this practice is not thought to be permanent. The chute reduces labour, improves unload times, and saves on the cost of elevating equipment. In real-world trials, about 1,500 kilograms were unloaded in under 14 minutes, and they can interface with a belt loader. So that's just one example of developing a solution for customers' changing needs, and we continue to look at the changing environment to see what else we can do. So to summarise, cargo operations tend to require heavy-duty equipment working to capacity, and products ranging from belt loaders to cargo loaders at the aircraft, and ULD and short and long-range transporters or tractors with dolly trains transfer freight to the cargo store. Praetors, passenger aircraft converted to handle cargo freight, are being used as a short to medium-term solution to increase cargo capacity. But different methods need to be employed when handling freight from a passenger cabin, as IATA's guidance recommends elevating equipment such as PRM and catering trucks and passenger stairs be utilised. And as you've seen, we developed a cargo chute to improve the efficiency of offloading non-fragile cargo from passenger cabins, and it's currently in its early stages of trial, but we're hoping to see some success with that. Thanks very much, Max.
Max, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Hey.
No, you're still muted, Max.
Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear
you can
you.
hear me now. Sorry, I've messed up the technology as usual. Very interesting to that cargo chute, David, and I'd like to ask you a little later on about the launch plans to roll that one out. Interesting development. But for now, I'll move on to Gilbert Burke from EFW. And Gilbert, you're going to talk to us about the conversions market.
Yes. Let me try to share my presentation. Hope you can see it. Thanks, Max, for inviting me to this panel, and hello to everyone. So I will actually, as I have only 5 to 10 minutes, skip the first 2 slides of my presentation, a little bit focusing on the pre-COVID market situation on air cargo and on the impact of supply chain. As you all will get the presentation in the aftermath, you can read through this. So I'll start here. So what do the actual implications mean for air cargo? As you have heard, Ayada said, so the demand will globally drop from more than 40%, which would actually represent 11,000 of the current jet aircraft fleet of 28,000. At the same time, the aircraft values and the lease rates dropped dramatically. And we believe the PAX market won't recover that quickly, and it will of course redevelop differently, and therefore surely the air cargo as well. So what does this mean for air cargo? Actually, everything is about speed, quantity, and reliability, and all this can easily be provided by dedicated freighter aircraft. So actually, by having a decrease in availability of belly capacity, which was 50% of all air cargo pre-COVID, of course, this may accelerate the demand for dedicated freighters. So what are the options we have? What are the options for the big fleet of grounded PAX aircraft? It was touched by all the previous speakers. It's the freighters or passenger freighters, those providing this extra cargo capacity. And of course, even though it might not be the best economically solution, it's covering some of the fixed cost an asset carries along. So we see cargo transporting seats, and we see cabins removed. There's even one A380 from Highfly where the cabin was removed, and then there's pallets and packages loaded on the pallets. But as we all know, to use a passenger transport as a freighter, it's very inefficient. You need a lot of manpower. It's very time consuming. You have still a risk to damage the cargo while on and offloading it. You may even damage the PAX interior. There's only limited types of cargo, so there's no cold chain products you can transport in the PAX cabin, and of course no hazardous goods. And of course with a passenger aircraft, the cargo you can transport is limited in size and weight. The size, because you need to keep the airflow. You cannot load higher than the seats, and because you do not have a smoke detection system like in a freighter. And from the weight point of view, as a PAX aircraft has not a 9G barrier, you cannot transport really heavy cargo. So what are the other options which were available already prior to COVID? Of course, you can refurbish your cabin of your aircraft, especially for lessors. But there's only a limited market, and there's a limited additional lifetime expectation for huge investment. What else can you do? You can part out your parked aircraft, but there's so many aircraft parked in the deserts, and the market is full of spare parts. This is a very limited market size. So finally, freighter conversions. Freighter conversions make increasingly sense. I'd like to touch a bit on the pre-COVID 20 years market forecast of one of the big analysts, Cargo Facts Consulting. You see here the development of the freighter fleet between the years 2019 to 38. Taking into consideration, you have to replace aging aircraft and the growth which was expected of air cargo by 4% per year. This would require more than 3,000 freighters, new ones, converted the next 20 years. So on the right-hand side of this slide, you see the narrow bodies. There's only the green pillar because the narrow bodies I'm touching on, there's no factory freighters available. So this market is completely served by converted aircraft, but it's the biggest fleet, representing 40% of the global freighter fleet. So for the time being, this market segment is only covered by Boeing products, the 737, the 757. But as I'm representing the Airbus conversion house, EFW, I'm happy to say that now a new market entrant, A321 and A320, will get into service still this year. So the first aircraft you will see up in the air being converted into a freighter is planned to get into service end of August this year. So the 320 and the 321, they are providing 10 and 55% respectively more containerized volume than a 737-800 freighter. Why? Why do they provide so much volume or more volume on containerized cargo? Because the A321 and the 320 are the only narrow-body single-aisle aircraft being able to load containerized freight in the lower decks. You see a comparison between the Boeing and the Airbus aircraft. So you see a typical express operation case, and clearly that 321, 320 makes a huge difference. Left-hand side, you see there's a container sorted in the warehouse, brought to the aircraft. And what do the guys do? They have to offload all the single packages again, put it on the belt loader, and then it's going without a container to the aircraft. The same then while offloading the aircraft on the destination. Whereas with the 321, the 320, you can easily pre-sort everything in the warehouse. Container goes into the aircraft, and it's easily unloaded at the destination. So actually this is very efficient. It's time saving. If you've got a target of 30 minutes to off and unload an A320 aircraft, and of course it's safe. It's safe for your cargo. It provides many other opportunities to transport cool containers, to transport hazardous goods containers, which you couldn't do if you load and unload single packages. Yeah, that's about what I had to say, and so I can support what David said with this new equipment for loading, unloading aircraft quickly and safely. So this will be the big change on the airports, to have high loaders as well for the smaller freighters. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you for listening. For those of you who get the presentation in the aftermath, there is some material to show the other products EFW is offering to the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you very much. And last but not least, I'll hand over to Celine, and then we'll come on to your questions. Over to you, Celine.
Thank you, Max. And good afternoon and good morning, everyone. So I'm representing TIACA, which is the International Air Transport Association. That's the unique association globally that represents really the entire air cargo chain, air cargo community rather. And we are in the process of transforming TIACA to also adapt to the new challenges that we are foreseeing. TIACA's vision for air cargo is a safe and profitable and united air cargo industry, embracing modern technologies and practices to sustainably and fairly serve trade and social development worldwide. Every word counts in this vision statement, and obviously, you know, when we started this process within TIACA, COVID was not there yet. and the vision for the future will be deeply impacted by what's happening now and what's coming next. I'm trying to pass the slides. Doesn't seem to work.
There we go.
Okay. So some considerations in this context. For me, air cargo, it has been very visible, and we talked about that already. Air cargo contributes to building a sustainable world, and without air cargo, there would have not been all those medical equipments and PPEs distributed worldwide. So it's an important contributor, and it was not really known or pictured as is in the recent past. Air cargo is also the savior of aviation, and we heard that from airlines, but it's also the same from airports and ground handlers. Air cargo is helping the aviation professional to survive the crisis. It's not enough, but it does make a big difference. The frontline workers are essentials, and as far as I remember, since I joined the cargo industry, we have been always talking about the need to retain, develop, and so attract, retain, develop the talents in the air cargo industry, but very rarely we focused on the frontline workers. And I think this crisis is really opening the eyes of everyone on those like supply chain heroes. We saw also that resilience is essential, and it was really heartbreaking to see that the world has suffered so much because the supply chain was also not ready to deliver all those medical equipments that were required. It's something that we need to address in the very, very near future for when, for instance, the COVID vaccines will be available. So we have great challenges ahead. What I heard from some pharma shippers is that if processes were fully digital and infrastructures were adequate already, there would have been less struggles and disruptions. Sounds like an open statement that is quite easy to make, but that's really the reality. As an industry, we have been quite slow to modernize for many different reasons. And we saw the consequences, and we saw also that the ones that did invest and modernize and digitalize their processes, and they probably did best and will recover better or faster in the near future. We have to take into account the new considerations that that are and will be influencing strategic decisions. I'm thinking about environmental matters, and when governments are helping the industry or our industry or other industries, public is also the civil world is really expecting that those financial support is not just given without any commitment towards sustainable processes and businesses. There will be more pressure from public, from consumers, and from regulators to be more sustainable. So that's really a fact. We can already foresee other pandemics that are going to hit us. Health, so other pandemics like COVID might come, but also the plastic pandemic, so still in the environmental concern, as well as the unemployment and poverty. Recession is around the corner, and it will impact our industry. on the passenger side, on the cargo side, on staff availability, on lack of cash. So we have to take that also into consideration. This crisis has shown that the world and our industry can move fast and can adapt and can embrace new digital processes. So that's good news. And for sure, not everything. I mean, crises are good opportunities to change, improve, and do different and better. But we also need to survive. So that's the key consideration we have to have. In terms of opportunities, because this is the topic of this webinar, I would say it's time to really focus on building the good next days as opposed to the good old days. We have to look at how to define the new key priorities for our industry, recognizing the supply chain heroes, as I mentioned earlier. Also reprioritizing the cargo investments to build adequate infrastructure and skills. I'm very pleased to hear Paul from Virgin saying that he discovered and he started talking to people in his company that he just never talked to or never met, and now he's part of the conversation. And I think it's also a very big opportunity for cargo as a whole, in general, at individual airlines, airports, ground handlers, and also at trade associations, etc., to really raise the profile of cargo internally and to make cargo count, the voice of cargo count. We have it's not an opportunity, it's an obligation to redesign also the physical cargo journey. And Robert, you mentioned that also for your plan to go back to work. Many considerations have to be taken into account, the social distancing and the disinfections and etc. And we can already foresee that this is not going to be removed soon. So it will be, at least for short medium term, the new type of processes. In the passenger side, there are many discussions around contactless passenger journey. We have to also look at touchless cargo journey, off airports activities, etc. So we have to look at that. Accelerating digital transformation and automation, that's also an opportunity. It's another one call for that. Rethinking business models, and we talked about conversion using cargo in the cabin. Is it a short-term solution, medium-term solution, etc.? This mixed business model can be put on the table and also redesigned. And that's a fantastic opportunity also to just reinvent the true industry collaboration. We talked about industry collaboration for years, but we are still very fragmented. The industry associations that are also representing the various parties are also fragmented, and we have a big opportunity now to be united as an industry and to work together. One of the very concrete challenge, and it's something that TIACA is willing to tackle together with our partner Pharma.io. One of the biggest challenge that is coming for the air cargo industry and logistics industry at large is the handling and storing and transport of the future vaccines for COVID. It's going to be a huge challenge. Everybody is like focusing, and TIACA first, focusing on the COVID vaccines. I would like to add also that all the focus on the COVID means that many programs for other vaccinations that are critical for many countries and regions, they have been put on hold. And for me, I would add that it's not just the delivery of COVID vaccines that is a challenge, it's the delivery of medical supplies and all types of vaccines in the coming years. That will be a big challenge, but also a big opportunity. Back to the topic of this webinar, fantastic opportunity for the air cargo industry. You asked me to open it to what are the opportunities for new entrants or for players in the air cargo industry. I mean, becoming a medical or pharmaceutical logistics specialist, cargo only type of aircraft that is really focused on pharmaceutical, that's one of the big opportunity of tomorrow's world. As well as e-commerce, it's still very, very much a driver for the future growth of our industry.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you very much, everybody. Excellent presentations, tons of questions to get through. So I'm going to start asking them, and I think unfortunately Mark has just left, but hopefully he'll pick his question answer up on the recording later on. This one's from Mark Camis, who says, what would be the average ground time for a for a 777, sorry, if you are cabin loading? So what sort of time would that take for a 777? Paul?
It kind of depends on lots of different scenarios, and it's actually a continuously moving beast. I think when we started the cabin loading exercise, it began in Shanghai, and originally we were scheduling in around 5 hours of ground time. It's fair to say that we've got quicker and quicker and quicker as we've gotten through the process. I think we've got it down to probably about 2.5, something like that. But it kind of it depends on all sorts of variables. The examples of flying to Shanghai for PPE works really well because all of the boxes are really uniform. The kind of human chain gangs that are involved work really well. So in Shanghai, it works brilliantly, and clearly they've had a lot of practice at it. But yeah, probably about 2.5 hours, and we continue to try to improve.
So how do you? I'll put you on the spot here, Robert. But looking at those pictures, unloading those cabins, there's a lot of bodies there involved in offloading those boxes from a ground handler's perspective. So how do you price that?
Well, can we talk about price? Don't think so.
Yeah,
but I mean, there's a big human resource needed to unload those cabins, is what I'm getting at there.
100%. I think that I was scrolling through. There is a question associated with that as well. So, look, it's simple economics. The labour involved in unloading the cabin from cargo is significantly greater than it is from unloading the lower deck. It's very labour intensive. We would typically put maybe 3, 4, in some cases 5 times the amount of employees to offload the main deck of a passenger aircraft than we would do the lower deck. So it's very labour intensive, so therefore it costs a lot more. So therefore the pricing associated with unloading or loading a passenger flight with full cargo loads is going to be more.
It's a sensitive time, so I guess there's just a strategic question there for a lot of ground handlers. Correct. As to what to do right now. A question here, which I guess David, you may well have answered in your presentation. It's from Adil Ahmed Sheikh, who says, if Praetor or Pax Freighter becomes a new norm, do you think there would be a need for specialist GSE equipment for cargo, for cabin cargo handling to reduce ground time, of which the chute that you mentioned seems like the perfect innovation? Yeah, absolutely, because at the moment everything really is an adaptation. Because the equipment and the cabin weren't designed to handle freight. So if that is the case, yeah, we'll have to look at different methodologies of loading and unloading. So yeah, and of course the flip side is how long, and this is the unknown question, how long will it go on for? Because that dictates the amount of investment you can afford to put into the product development. Could you tell us more, because you mentioned that chutes in development and testing phase at the moment. When do you anticipate that would be readily available to the market? Fairly soon. I mean, I think I'm talking weeks, really. There's a few final modifications that we'll be looking to do to it, but yeah, it's virtually there. Interesting. Thank you, David. Next question you've teed up then is, I mean, from the panel, how long do we think the age of the Praetor will last? Because it's my understanding that if you convert, you need there's obviously a lot of safety considerations. You need approval from your National Aviation Authority. This is meant to be a temporary measure. I mean, what are people's thoughts?
Well, for me, Max, speaking as a handler, but having some degree of airline experience as well, my personal opinion is that I don't see it as a long term. I think the economics of flying a passenger aircraft with only cargo loads on there probably don't work long term. I think fuel price at the moment is supporting this process, but if fuel prices go up, that will change quite dramatically. I would imagine that the yields that the airlines are managing to secure, because there's a little bit less capacity, is also supporting. But as capacity comes back online, I don't see loads in the passenger aircraft in the cabin, in passenger aircraft that haven't been converted. So if you've still got the seats in for passenger aircraft, I don't see that continuing long term. For any carrier that has removed the seats, that's a slightly different story, something Murat was talking to in his initial presentation. So that's perhaps a slightly longer term solution. But short term, once capacity starts to come back, I wouldn't see the continuation of these at all.
Murat, from your perspective, is this a plan for the next 6 months, for a year at Turkish? How long do you see the Praetors in operation?
I can say that the price were higher in the beginning of the process, and while we were making the cost and benefit analysis, it was meaningful to make transportation with cabin on the cabin seats. But now it's losing its efficiency because the prices are going down and its costs are high, and the capacity is coming back because the passenger flights are starting day by day. The numbers are increasing. So I think at the end of this year, the main deck loading will lose its advantage completely. But the other versions, the complete conversions, should be taken into consideration in the beginning of next year by most of the airlines.
Thank you, Murat. Gilbert.
Yeah, I can fully agree to what Murat said. We believe this will, someone disappear, but nevertheless, it will be an option for the future as well, as we all learn many lessons out of the current situation. So if an airline has invested in several equipment like this new loading device for the main deck, I'm pretty sure that some of the airlines will always keep this possibility in mind for future situations like this, in order to compensate a lower load factor. For example, I could even imagine if this is in compliance with the authority regulations, that some airlines will think about a combination of packs and cargo transport, maybe to remove the eco seats in the aft section, to close the curtains and there to transport some cargo. I'm not quite sure. Or airlines thinking about a combi version. There's also combi versions on the market. Or then what I said, to if they are not already have freighters, being a combination carrier, maybe to invest into freighter conversion or new freighters, and then to become a combination carrier.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to
one more thing I can add. I think
yes,
one more thing I can add. The limitations of the cargo which can be carried on main deck is another issue, because we are generally carrying PPEs on main deck, but those are losing its value, and people are not wanting those shipments as they did before. In the coming days, we are going to carry standard cargo products, and those cannot be carried on passenger cabins. So we need to switch to another methodology, I think.
Okay, thank you. A question for you, Paul, that's coming from Simone Bovey, who asks, what were the main challenges for the transportation of cargo in the cabin, in your opinion?
Yeah, good question. So I guess to put some context into the cabin question, right now we're flying probably around 600, 620 cargo-only flights per month. Probably around 10% of those are cabin loaded. So the vast majority of our operations, to kind of all intents and purposes, are fairly standard. It's all about loading the belly and trying to optimize the belly. In the cases, the limited cases really, where we are cabin loading, in the first instance, as the guys have just mentioned, there's a lot of restrictions around what type of cargo can be loaded into the cabin. So trying to find the right mix so that it works economically and works operationally, the scenarios are pretty limited and are probably reducing as time goes by. So I guess the first challenge is trying to find that right opportunity. And then secondly, once you're into the operational realities of trying to find the right levels of manpower, trying to work around different operational constraints. So for example, trying to get landing slots to coincide with availability of resources at different airports can often be a challenge. And actually, as we see more flights starting to increase in certain airports, start to get a bit busier, those types of constraints are becoming a bit more commonplace. But yeah, I guess in summary, just trying to find the right commercial opportunity and to then tie that down to something that works operationally is not, it's not too straightforward, and therefore really the focus for us, or the majority of our activity, remains the more conventional belly-based activities.
And whilst I've got you there, Paul, on the line, Amir has asked whether the filing for Chapter 15 protection in the US has had any effect at all on cargo ops, other than probably to make you busier and to drive some more revenue.
Yeah. So it's a fairly complex scenario. I guess hopefully people may remember about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we announced a $1.5 billion recapitalization program, and that recapitalization is kind of multifaceted. So it is in part injection of fresh capital. It is in part a reorganization of certain fees and settlements that we have with our 2 shareholders, Delta and the Virgin Group. And it's also in part a bit of a reorganization around the balance sheet. So this is just part of that ongoing process. It was reported in a kind of slightly negative tone and sounded like bankruptcy. But I'm pleased to say that we are fully solvent, we are fully operational. We continue to fly those 600 or so flights per week. And it's fair to say that our customers and our partners have been fantastic through this process. So obviously some of these reports have prompted questions and uncertainty, but everybody's worked brilliantly with us as we've gone through that. So we're not bankrupt, we're fully solvent, and we continue to trade.
Good news, thank you, Paul. Okay, question from Bang Bozy to perhaps for you, Robert. What strategies should ground handlers engage in to manage their operational staff and their maintenance staff respectively in times like these?
Sorry, Max, just repeat the question for me.
So a question around what strategies handlers should engage in to manage ops staff and maintenance staff respectively in times like these, so during this crisis.
So what strategies? So I think that probably goes back to the point I was making at the start of the presentation about making sure people are safe and secure. That's obviously the number 1 priority. So the 5-point plan that we put into place for people returning to work, it covers exactly that. I think what we found, and interesting that we found this, is that a lot of employees are extremely flexible and very understanding of the situation that most organizations, aviation organizations, find themselves in. It's not simple and it's not straightforward, and issues they may have it in the past about rosters and shifts and start times and finishes. A lot of people are being a lot more flexible and a lot more supportive of the business as well. So it goes hand in hand with the organizations having to try to ensure that they're safe and secure, but when we're supported with great staff as well that are being very flexible and very understanding, it actually makes life a lot easier.
Okay, thank you, Robert. A question here from Buafu, who asks, how you think the sort of increase in air cargo market interest will be affected if commercial passenger flights reach around 75% of volumes across the world. So I guess what we're getting at here is, will there come a tipping point when PAX volumes restore to a level that means cargo no longer has its place in the sun, and perhaps is there a cut-off point where we return to pre-COVID?
Again, in my personal opinion, I don't think there will be a return to pre-COVID. I think the world is now a different place. I think logistical chains have adapted. I think that when there is longer term delivery requirements, there'll be perhaps a little bit more shipping. But at the same time, I think airlines have realized the benefit of cargo. It's not just let's put something in the bottom of the aircraft and hope that that's okay. I think that they've realized that there's really good economics on cargo when it works very well. So I would see, and what we are seeing now is that airlines that have had the opportunity to invest in bigger aircraft, 777s, 350s, they've got a very, very good cargo payload compared to the A380, and that's what we're seeing is carriers looking to the future, bigger aircraft with a bigger cargo payload. So I don't think we'll go back to what we were. I think the passenger freighters that we've been discussing here will disappear into perhaps next year, maybe even after that. And I think there will be perhaps a few more freighter operations than there were previously. I think there'll be some carriers that have traditionally shied away from freighter activity that may well look to have freighters to support their passenger network as well. And as I say, bigger aircraft with more cargo payloads, because then you're spreading your risk on that particular route away from just passenger traffic to passenger and cargo. So
the days of this capacity crunch are numbered. Do you think that we'll close this gap down?
Absolutely, I do. Yes, yeah, completely.
There's a good question here from Evans relating to the offloading of that cargo in the cabin, and asking around what the safety challenges have been. You've obviously got employees. This isn't perhaps something they're used to doing day to day. You've got heavy equipment, I'm guessing sometimes, or boxes that can cause damage coming off of the out of that cabin. So a comment from all of you really on what some of the safety considerations are.
I can pick that one up.
Yes, and I'll come to Murat afterwards. But Robert, you start.
Yeah. So two issues. One, most importantly, people safety, and two, then aircraft safety. So people safety. When we first had these operations, we had to consider how to get those boxes off of the main deck. And it is way too labor intensive to have one individual picking up one box, walking down a set of steps and putting it onto a truck. So we utilized catering trucks, we utilized ambulifts, we utilized any sort of GSE that could go to main deck height, not using a main deck loader because it's not enclosed. So we found sort of creative ways to do that. There isn't a piece of equipment out there that we're aware of today that does exactly what we would want it to do in unloading that process. And would we want to spend money on something that we may use lots of times in 6 months and never use it again? So then the issue is about labor availability. So the challenges are, can you find the appropriate amount of labor to turn around that aircraft? Can you actually make it work and get a return against that with the pricing structure? Can you find some GSE that supports what you're doing but isn't actually dedicated solely just to that piece of work? And then can you ensure that your employees socially distance whilst they're unloading that aircraft as well? And that's probably the biggest challenge that we found. People just want to help. People want to unload an aircraft, and if they can see somebody struggling with a box, then they're going to help them. And of course, social distancing goes straight out the window. So certainly not an easy process. Certainly not something that we would say this is going to fundamentally change cargo handling in the future. It's a nice to have, it's a nice outlet, but as I keep saying, I don't see it for the long term.
Thank you, Robert. Murat.
I mentioned in my presentation, but some of the limitations taken by the authorities, Boeing or EASA or other authorities, seems too limited, I think, because per seat you can only carry 22.5 kilos according to Boeing's regulations, and I am applying it in my operations, but it seems very limited application, and I feel it's not very suitable, and it cannot continue this way, I think. And I see that many airlines are not obeying these rules, and if it's really a valid thing, then there's a real risk on it who is not adopting those regulations. But if it is the case that it's really 22.5 kilos per seat, then it will be meaningless to carry on-seat shipments in too near future.
Thank you, Murat. Quickly, I'm going to put the poll to the audience, and then I've got a question for you, Celine, that's come in. But I'm going to ask everyone out there in the audience to vote on this question now. So first up is, are you looking to expand your cargo business offer in the next 6 months? So please vote away. And there is a follow-up question, which will load up in a second. Anyone who wasn't, I'm sure they're very keen to do so after listening to those presentations. So we do look like we have a resounding number who are definitely looking to increase their cargo presence. 85% saying yes, they are looking to increase their cargo offer in the next 6 months. So an overwhelming number there. And then if we can just load the second poll up, which then asks what you would foresee as some of the biggest challenges and hurdles to doing that. So what do you think are the big challenges in increasing your cargo offer? If you have a look through those options and vote for the one that you think is your biggest challenge. We have, sourcing the investment for new equipment, the capital that you'll need, perhaps lack of management or staff expertise in cargo, making the right connections, building those links with airlines, with freight forwarders, with handlers, regulatory compliance, or promoting yourselves as a cargo specialist if your previous expertise was perhaps PAX handling or passenger transport. I'll leave that one to go. And then Celine, I seem to have lost this question, but I'm very sure that it was asking, you mentioned in your presentation, I believe, around digitalization. And I believe the question was just asking for a bit more information about how you see that taking shape in the cargo industry over the next few years.
Yeah, I replied
oh, that's why it disappeared.
On the chat. That's why it disappeared. Yeah, my take on that is digital transformation, in my view, will accelerate after the crisis. It's easy to say, and it's probably not easy to implement. It was not easy to implement before. I think the industry as a whole saw that digital processes, when you have them in place, it facilitates easing the everything. It does contribute to make also the processes and also the physical movement of cargo contactless. If you want to do that, you have to go to digital. It does help also with speed, efficiency. If we talk about being more integrated as an industry and truly collaborative and share information and data to improve reliability, to improve visibility, those are key value proposition that the shippers, both on e-commerce side and on the pharma side, so two big driver for the air cargo industry. Shippers on those two sectors, they are looking for transparency, visibility, track and trace. So that's going to be more and more demanded. it was already the case, but it's going to be more. Digital processes support also remote working, so very important those days, and it will continue being very important. And it will ultimately also help optimizing loads on aircraft with more data available, etc. So it will also contribute to a better environmental footprint. So overall, I think the business case is quite clear. Internally from the decision makers, the CFOs of organizations, I think they are now more open to listen to cargo and more open to prioritize investments for cargo. So hopefully it will help also accelerate the digital transformation of air cargo, because it was one of the key blockers industry was suffering from. And now I would say probably the biggest challenge is for the ones that were late in their digital transformation and that are really suffering from the crisis. They might just run out of cash to do the necessary investments. So I would say for those ones, that's going to be complicated.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you. Can we show the results of our poll now? Oh, there we go. So biggest challenge viewers anticipated enhancing their cargo offer. So the top challenge, 44% saying making the right business connections with airlines, freight forwarders or handlers. You're going to think I set this up, but just to remind you, we do have a cargo zone at GHI's annual conference in Copenhagen later this year. And but on a serious note, stakeholder collaboration is a key thing, and we are talking about an industry that needs to come together at all of our webinars. We keep hearing this message and build links and bridges that may not have been there before this crisis struck.
Well, I can just encourage all those companies to also use their trade associations and use TIACA to create those business connections. It might help. Yes,
and as discussed in the past, I think cargo and passenger, maybe there has been that delineation in the past, but it no longer is there. It can't be there. It has to be one family. Yep. So interesting results, and we'll share those in depth afterwards. We've got about 5 minutes left, just under 5 minutes. I'm going to rattle through a few more of these questions. We've got a good one here from Patrick Brown. What are the impacts of current industry conditions and operations at the airport air cargo warehouse at both departure and arrival? Some thoughts from Paul, Murat.
Sorry, Matt, can you just repeat the start of the question?
Yes, so what are the impacts of current industry conditions and operations at the airport air cargo warehouse at both departure and arrival?
So current industry conditions, it's very different in different locations around the world. So what we have to do in London is very different from what we have to do in Toronto versus Johannesburg and Melbourne. So it's different in different locations because there's different government regulations. But nearly all operations, we need to have the appropriate PPE, and that is beyond the normal safety PPE, like safety shoes, and we're talking about masks and gloves. Obviously, we're looking to disinfect the areas as much as we can do as well, and enhance the cleaning that we do in warehouses all around the world. And the social distancing piece, that's the hardest element for us to continue to commit to. And we keep reminding our teams that they have to adhere to social distancing, but it's very difficult to do that in a day-to-day operation. So that's one of the challenges. So what we haven't seen is industry regulations associated with COVID-19 expectations. It's more about governmental regulations and morally what is right for our employees for us to do as well.
Okay. Any other comments, Murat?
I agree with Robert, especially the mask. Wearing mask is not something the workers choose to work, because it after some certain time affects the productivity of the workers, and really they need to stop and take out the mask and relax. After some time they can come back to their works. The other thing, the productivity is decreasing because, especially in changing rooms, for example, in the beginning or end of their working times, we put them in their changing room in an order, and the others are waiting. So we are losing some more time for that. It's we calculated it's 45 minutes for us, but in 8 hours, 45 minutes, it means that 8%, or especially approximately 10% loss of manpower for us. There are other things, social distancing. We can send everybody at the same time to the dining rooms, etc. There are some undesired situations, but it's going to pass. The vaccines are coming. We heard that Putin is using it in his daughter. So
it's got to be safe. Indeed. Okay, guys, we are right out of time. So just in the final few minutes, I'll just ask you to all perhaps leave us a final thought around. We've talked throughout about the opportunity here for new market entrants, extending market share for those who already had a cargo offer. Just ask you individually, what sort of sum up, what's your sort of advice to operators about how they now take advantage of the opportunities that we're seeing in cargo? And Robert, you're unfortunate enough to be top of my screen, so I'm going to start with you.
I can give a really simple answer to that one. Don't do it. Ask Aviation to do it for you. We're very experienced, very capable. So no, look, I think there was a point you made earlier on about having to differentiate between ground handling, passenger handling, and cargo. I rejoined Menzies 3 years ago because Menzies had lost focus on the cargo business. So what we found is that absolutely from an airline procurement perspective, cargo people like to talk to cargo people and passenger people like to talk to passenger people. There is an element of crossover to a certain degree, but not a huge amount. So in an effort to keep this short, because I could talk about this for a long time, there are unfortunately now a lot of cargo subject matter experts that are no longer employed. In many cases, there's lots of really good people out there on the market. From an airline perspective, find somebody that knows cargo, snap them up, and use them because they are worth their weight in gold when you can get it right.
Thank you, Robert. Paul, I'll come to you next. Final thoughts.
Similar to Rob, so I think it's a slightly cliche thing to say, but cargo really is all about human relationships. And so often for us, the big differentiator is how we respond when things go wrong. Inevitably, things do go wrong from time to time. And by having those strong working human relationships, you're able to anticipate and to change and to learn and to adapt, etc. And all of that comes through just having those really strong bonds and working relationships. So I guess point number one is just think about how you engage with and potentially dialogue with potential clients and potential partners. Secondly, Rob also mentioned, or thinking specifically about COVID-19 and the challenges of COVID-19. The cabin loading component is important, but Rob made some really interesting points around having to adapt to ever-changing schedules and a very unpredictable working environment. And how do you plan for that? How do you operate economically? Trying to piece together the jigsaw, as Rob put it, to be able to effectively deliver in those highly fluid circumstances, I think really is the key right now.
Thank you, Paul. David.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, first of all, I would say have the right equipment for the job. The right equipment for the application. Don't assume that just because it's always been done a certain way, that's the best way to do it. There's developments and innovations going on all the time. Making sure the staff are trained to operate the equipment. Some of it's quite complex. I mean, belt loader could be seen as fairly straightforward, but having the staff operating the equipment safely and efficiently is going to help improve your turnaround time. And work with manufacturers on the issues that you've got. The chute was a great example. of a short-term need. You know, we've spoken today about about manpower capacity issues, labour intensive, and you know, hopefully there we've come up with something that's going to solve a short-term problem. But there'll be other issues out there as well that we can work together and collaborate and make everything more efficient.
Thank you, David. Celine.
Yep. I think the opportunity is really to first recover and survive, but second to really look at all those new trends, new consideration, new factors, and be innovative enough to rethink your business model, to rethink your operations. I have to say, and I didn't have the opportunity before, but I'm like super impressed with David cargo chute presentation. I think this is exactly what this industry is able to do and should be doing more. It's really to look at the challenges that we have, be innovative, resilient, work in collaboration with all the partners to find the new solutions and to redefine this next normal. We can only just talk about it's not we have to reinvent the new normal, the next normal, but we need to be really open-minded and take all those opportunities and take the seats also that we have now at the table to discuss with all the decision makers in the aviation industry and to raise the importance of cargo on their own agenda.
Thank you, Celine. Murat.
I listed 4 things while you're talking. First of all, flexibility is important. The airlines or any parties should change their positions according to the new normal. And the second thing is acting speedily, fastly. If you adapt fastly, then you are going to make hay when the sun shines. The third thing, you need to preserve the service quality. It's going to make the customers happy. The fourth topic is the making customers happy in order to continue the operations and the air cargo alive. And one thing I'm going to add finally, when Robert stopped his speech, a quote of Richard Branson came into my mind. He was telling, if you want to be a millionaire, start with $1 billion and launch a new airline.
Thank you, Murat. Thank you. And Gilbert, finally.
Yeah. Okay. As we all know, all our economies depend on our supply chains. So it's really wise to for everyone that we watch out for opportunities and the best solution in order to keep the service level. No matter which business sector, if it's B2B, if it's e-commerce, if it's online retail. So be strong advice to the PAX operators to really check their belly capacity in terms of FTKs available, routes, destinations, and the frequencies. So it's not only about to have larger aircraft with bigger belly capacity, but maybe could be also a solution to have smaller aircraft with higher frequencies to serve the demand for the supply chain. Yeah, so this would be my advice.
Thank you, Gilbert. Well, thank you all very much. Some excellent presentations and contributions today. And just finally, the cargo conversation for us doesn't stop here. It is crucial, and we will be covering cargo topics we've heard about today: GSE innovation, cargo in the cabin, the capacity crunch in greater depth within the cargo zone at GHI's annual conference in Copenhagen. There is also an opportunity for stakeholder collaboration at that event to network and deliver those sort of connections that we've pressed upon today that are so important. So we will send you some more details. Also a reminder that the next webinar takes place on the 3rd of September, which is looking at sustainability in aviation. So we will see you all there. Thank you for listening today. Thanks for all your questions. Apologies we didn't get through them all, but I will share some of those questions, if that's okay with the panel, after we finish, so that you can answer the ones that we haven't been able to get to today, and we'll get back to you. Thank you to JBT again for being our lead sponsor today. That's it. We'll see you on the 3rd of September. We've got a little feedback survey coming round, so please fill that in, and we will send on the presentations and the recording from today to you tomorrow morning, UK time, European time. Thank you all very much. Take care. Look after yourselves.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.